Game over, man. Game over. Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 561 for November 20th, 2023, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Yeah,
For those
you can tell we're
Thanksgiving, at least in the United States.
Yeah, you can tell we're happy. I feel like the closer we get to Thanksgiving, JD, the more animated our introductions are for these shows. Like just right there, the way you said your name, the way I said my name, it's like, yes, such joy. And then Thanksgiving ends, it's like, oh, the other holidays are coming up now too, aren't they?
Yes, they are. I'm very excited. I am one of those. Judge me if you must.
Oh no,
That's
you're
fine.
one of those.
I am one of those. I will put up my Christmas tree on November 1st. Yes.
No,
you heard me.
no.
I
My
have
respect
no
for you
shame.
is it's
That's
just
fine.
a little bit.
I
I
get it.
still love you, man, but
Look,
come
if
on.
you want to, if I lose respect or love or adoration from any of the listeners, viewers out there, I am willing to accept it. But here, so here's my explanation. I do have a justification. Now, whether you feel like it's warranted or not, I will leave up to you to interpret.
Okay, this should be
However, here's where I'm coming from. One, like most people, huge Christmas fan.
Yep, fair.
Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday, which maybe adds some irony to this.
I
However,
was just going to say you have a lot of explaining to do if that's the case.
Thanksgiving is my favorite. And look, we put out similarly. I will put out fall decorations on September 1st. Okay, as soon as
okay, that's fair. I don't have a
soon
problem with that.
As what I consider the summer to be, as soon as it's over, as soon as we move into fall, like I get it, the summer solstice goes to like September 22nd.
Sure.
But vibes wise, it's September 1st.
Yeah.
And we put out our fall decorations then all the way through September. Obviously, we add more to it in October to make it more Halloween-y, not just fall.
Get a few more oranges in there.
You get some more oranges in there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We amp it up a little bit. Then comes November, and I put up the tree and all my Christmas decorations. Some of the fall stuff is still up, but it's very Christmassy in our house. I will put up our lights on the house, climb onto the roof, get them on the house, put some stuff outside. And the reason I do this is because, one, I just love the seasons.
Yeah.
Not just this one, but as I noted, even going back to September 1st. So I just love the seasons. And especially now, I have to indulge as much as I can because I live in South Florida. I am not from South Florida. I am from the great state of Michigan. Go Blue. And
No, we're not going to do
in
that again.
Michigan, there's, of course, seasons.
There's of course
There's
snow.
the
They
fall.
have white things.
It's snow. You get all of that. And look, not everyone is built for it. And
No,
I
not everyone likes it.
understand
No.
that some people don't like the cold.
No, people complain about it here in Pennsylvania all the time.
Exactly. I get it. But I grew up loving the seasons and the change. I'm a winter sports person. Many of you know. I grew up playing hockey. So, yes, it's 13 degrees outside. We're on the pond shooting some puck. Like, that's how I grew up.
Yeah.
And I'm a winter guy by nature.
Yeah. Fair.
And I live in a climate where it is a middle finger to winter.
Oh, winter does not exist there.
Does not exist. It is a myth where I live.
What is the coldest it usually gets in South Florida, especially around December and January? Like nighttime? Is it like in the 40s or 50s at worst?
Okay, so most of the time, like in November and December, it's still blazing hot.
Yeah.
It's still like it might get down into the 70s at night here, which I go outside and enjoy as much as I can at night. However, it's still really hot. You know, my son just started a soccer league and he's played 2 games. They're Saturday mornings at like 10:15. Okay. 10:15 in the morning in most places. It's still kind of cool this time of year, especially.
Yeah.
In Michigan, I'm sure it's the same in Pennsylvania. I mean, there's a nice little chill at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
No,
Fair.
in South Florida, we're watching these games and sweating our asses off. It is still 90 degrees.
So
It's
you're just
miserable.
So your justification for starting Christmas decorations earlier is because you're trying to reclaim some aspect of winter as early as
Yes.
possible. Why don't you just start it in September?
Well, I'm trying to be a little reasonable, I guess.
I guess that's the thing, because like geography really does matter as far as where this perspective is, right?
It really does, because like
Yeah.
I get extremely homesick this time of year. Very, very homesick. And since COVID, it's been hard to get home.
Yeah.
I've maybe been home once in the last 3 years. I was doing fairly well before COVID to get home at least once a year, especially in the fall. And it was a great time. But it's been harder to get home, and not just because of COVID and how that changed things, but I now have 2 kids, and that makes things all the more challenging. So I'm not able to go home and experience it. This year, thankfully, I got to go to Pennsylvania for a little event that some people might be aware of.
Yeah, my ring's a little heavier because of it.
So I got to experience that. In fact, I can't remember which night it was. It must have been the Friday night before the wedding.
That's when you got in. Yeah, it was a Saturday night wedding.
Yes. I got there Friday, and Friday night, I had a little balcony on the outside of my hotel room, and it was at nighttime, 40 degrees.
Oh, you texted me right away.
Yeah, it was incredible. Like, I made a cup of coffee. This is at like 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And I didn't care. I know you're not supposed to drink coffee late at night, but look,
Hey,
I had
coffee
to indulge.
doing the right thing.
I made a cup of coffee. I just wanted to go outside and drink a cup of coffee in the cold air. It was like 40 degrees at like 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I'm out there in shorts and a t-shirt because I just wanted to embrace the cold as much as possible. Okay.
Gosh.
Because
People, if they saw you, they'd think, who is this weird
they
Eskimo
think I
over
was
here?
crazy for sure. And look, maybe I am, but it is incessantly insufferable here, the heat. It drives, especially this time of year. Like during the summer, whatever, it's the summertime. I get it.
Yeah.
But November, December, that's when the cool is supposed to be crisp and sharp and leaves are on the ground. And that it's still summertime. Goddamn time.
How different was it when you were living in, was it Gainesville before you moved to South Florida?
Gainesville was worse because it was
Really?
because that's, when the University of Florida is in Gainesville, right?
Okay.
And the football stadium there, they call it the Swamp. And for good reason. It is
okay.
in the middle of a swamp, Gainesville is, and it's much muggier. It's hotter in Gainesville. It is.
Well, yeah. If the humidity's
worse.
a lot higher, it probably soaks in that extra heat and just kind of traps it, right?
Yeah. Here we're close enough to the ocean that it's not nearly as miserable comparatively. But again, it's still hot here all the time. All the time. All the time. All the time. It is hot. It's miserable for me.
Okay, so your justification makes sense, and this is why I do think geography matters here with both of our respective
that's all I'm
perspectives.
saying,
But at the same time, like I guess part of the other thing with me and why I get so agitated when Christmas decorations go up before Thanksgiving. Well, one, it is also my favorite holiday. Thanksgiving is. I love this holiday. I love the time with family and the camaraderie of it. The fact that you're basically forced to sit down and really find that familial dynamic that you don't always get a chance to share, right? It's therapeutic, I think. But then, like you were talking about when August turns into September. September is kind of that starting point when you start to really kind of sense autumn vibes, right? September 1st, regardless of solstice rules, that doesn't matter to me. But I would say the same thing about December 1st. Like that's when I start sensing winter vibes. So when wintry holiday things go up before that, it's just like you're jumping the gun. You're jumping the gun.
Yeah, I think that's fair if I'm looking at it from an autumn to winter thing.
And maybe
But
from
for
a
me-
Pennsylvanian perspective too.
Well, I feel like that's a perspective that many will share. I certainly
Okay.
have that in some degree, at least if I'm thinking about it in terms of seasons,
Mhm.
although it's much harder to do that now because,
Yeah.
again, it is summer all the time. All the time. But generally, I do sympathize with that notion. For me, it's less of a seasonal perspective and it's
Sure.
a holiday perspective. It's the holidays, and Christmas and Thanksgiving to me are not mutually exclusive. I
Oh,
know
they are
they're
to me.
technically different holidays, but for me,
Yeah.
they're not mutually exclusive.
If I drove past someone's house and they chose to decorate their house in a giant turkey, I would just knock on their door and shake their hand. That's that's what I would do.
So, I mean, but broadly speaking, it really is less that for me, and it's more so just trying to maintain some sort of psychological sanity of this is winter, and this
Yeah.
is my favorite time of year, and back home it's much cooler than it is here, where it's still 90 degrees
that's
outside
fair,
and
that's
I'm
fair.
sweating my butt off.
It must also be different when you have kids too.
Well, a little bit. I mean, because
Yeah.
Sam and now Andrew, they certainly love the lights and the decorating and all that sort of stuff. But
Sure.
which is part of it. But it reminds me of home, and I get so homesick that putting up the Christmas tree on November 1st, it is a remedy. It keeps my sanity, and so then I don't have to go take a shower and cry.
You
that's why.
you should take another
I
trip
do.
to Philly. Here in Philly, they have a great tree lighting ceremony. I think you should come and visit just to feel a little bit more nostalgic there.
Yeah, maybe that is something we'll do one day.
Yep.
That
Another trip.
That is why my Christmas stuff is up. But yes, I love Thanksgiving. It's
Me
one of my
too.
favorite holidays. And this year, and I know we're getting into the weeds here a little bit, but this year is even more exciting to me because it's going to be different than what it usually is for me. Traditionally speaking, again, as I noted, I'm from the great state of Michigan. And in the great state of Michigan is the city that some people know of. It's called Detroit.
Yeah.
You'll recognize it because it's in horror films constantly.
A lot.
For
All the time.
It's, not great neighborhoods.
For its
However-
dilapidation.
Yes. However,
Wait, was that the movie Barbarian? Didn't that
Yes.
take place just outside of Detroit?
it took place in one of the neighborhoods there, and that's
Yeah.
one of the reasons I didn't like that movie.
Yeah.
I think it's one thing to exploit the area because of how it looks, but it's in the context of something that's not real.
Yeah.
I get that. I understand that.
Sure.
Barbarian is a movie that exploits something that is very real.
Yeah.
A neighborhood that is very real, where horror has been very real to the people that live there. And I'm sorry, but nothing that film does even touches the real horror that neighborhood's experienced. But it's trying to exploit it for entertainment.
Well, it is kind of
I'm
on its
sorry, but
mind
that
too. That's the
morally
problem with that
doesn't sit right with
movie.
me.
Well, that's the problem with that movie too. And we're not here to review Barbarian, but I think that film has many problems. I'm not on that film's side like most people seem to be, but it definitely feels both exploitative, but also like it's trying to be like a geographical lesson into something.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's able to have it both ways at all.
I agree. At any rate,
Yeah.
my whole point in bringing up Detroit is to say that there's a football team there.
There is a
Okay?
football team there,
There's a
and
football
there's also a
team
movie called
in Detroit.
Barbarian shot there, and we don't recommend it.
Yeah. But in Detroit, there is an NFL team. And historically, what's been fun with my family and many in the area is that, you get together with your family. It's the camaraderie that Brennan is talking about. You're eating great food and you're having fun. And for us, it is watching the Detroit Lions embarrass themselves on national TV every year. Every year. Every year. Forever. Just huge embarrassment. One of the worst franchises in all of sports, and somehow they get the national game on Thanksgiving. I don't know how that stuck, but it became tradition. This year, though, is different. Now, they still might embarrass themselves on national TV. Let's go ahead and put that out there. However, the Detroit Lions currently are 8-2. Brendan, trivia.
What who is this team right now?
What year was the last time the Detroit Red Wings started the season 8-2?
The Red Wings or the Lions?
The Lions.
The Lions, because you just said Red Wings. I was a little confused.
Oh,
by
sorry.
that.
Yeah, the Lions.
I was like, are we transitioning back to your winter love of sports right now?
I do have hockey on the brain.
You do have
the
hockey
Lions
on the brain.
are one of the
when
worst
was the last
franchises
time?
in sports.
Okay, so when was the last time the Lions were 8-2? I'm going to guess, I don't know, 1976.
It's a good guess, but you didn't go far back enough.
Okay. I was trying to be a little optimistic there. Even.
Okay, the last.
I knew you were trying to make a point.
The last time the Lions started 8-2 was 1962.
Okay,
that was 61 years ago.
14 years off from my guess.
Look, most franchises will at least luck into an 8-2 start at some point within a 61-year time gap.
Yeah,
but no. The Lions have always been just absolutely, amusingly embarrassing.
Well, if they do well on Thanksgiving Day, then I think we have a new holiday a brewing.
Well, and see, that's where, maybe the tides are changing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's why I just feel like I feel justified as a Lions fan when I have said forever, this is the worst franchise in sports. I'm sorry. 61 years since they've started a season 8-2. 61. Like, your mind can't comprehend that. That almost feels like a lie. Like I'm making that up.
Our generation has parents that were born in that year.
Yeah. Like it feels like if I was being sarcastic and saying like, yeah, it's been 60 years since the Lions had a winning season. You're like,
no.
ha, ha, ha. Yeah,
no, that's actually an accurate statement.
That's for real.
Yeah.
Like
I knew it was a long time, but I was not going to go back that far.
I told that to my wife earlier, and she's like, the first thing I thought of was the Titanic meme of it's been 84 years.
Actually, it's getting close to that.
That's what I said. I was like, you say that jokingly, but you're not that far off. Like you're just 20 years difference there.
Rose DeWitt Cater is probably a big Lions fan right now.
Like that's how bad that franchise has been. So like historically, my whole life, they've been just the worst. So on Thanksgiving, they of course embarrass themselves. And this year might be different. They're 8-2. They look real good, and I know they're coming off a short week because they played yesterday as we're recording this on Sunday. Yeah. So they got a short week to prepare. We'll see how it turns out, but they're looking good. They, at the very least, I don't think will embarrass themselves. If they lose, it'll be a close game.
No, if they lose, they'll still be 8-3. It's not a bad record to have right now.
So anyway, that's part. That's why Thanksgiving has always meant something to me. I always love it, but like Christmas and Thanksgiving are just combined. I love them both holidays. So
yeah, it's a good time of year. It's a good time of year.
So Brendan and I are going to spend the rest of the show power ranking the rest of the holidays.
Yeah, we already got through 2 of them. We've got the rest to go. So next up is Valentine's Day, and that's way at the bottom. Oh, we forgot about New Year's. New Year's is a big deal too.
Yeah.
We can't forget that. We got to go in order.
That might be a Patreon exclusive thing that we do one of these days.
I guess it will have to be holiday movies, so we actually keep it cinematic themed in some way.
Film themed.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was a long, fun little intro segment. Really what we're going to be doing on this show is doing a catch-up episode. Essentially, we used to do this on Patreon quite often under the old structure.
Right.
However, I think we're going to bring it to the show here because it is award season after all, and there are a lot of movies that we're catching up with in preparation for the end of the year shenanigans that we all participate with.
Yeah.
And we can't review every single movie that we're seeing. So while we do have some reviews on the slate, our Hunger Games episode will be up very soon when this goes live. So you can be on the lookout for that. And later on this week, we will have a review for Alexander Payne's The Holdovers as well.
Yep.
And Rustin, which is out on Netflix right now, starring Coleman Domingo. And there's a lot of talk right now with his performance there when it comes to the Oscars and awards. So we'll have
really good year
that.
so far just for performances, right? There's been so much talk about varying performances in varying categories, whether it be the supporting categories or the leading categories. It's been really strong thus far.
Yeah, I agree. So that should be really fun when we get to all of the year-end award stuff. And I do look forward to talking about some of these movies when we do review them. However, Brendan and I have also been catching up with a lot of other movies that we won't have full reviews for, but that's what this episode is for. We're going to talk about these movies that we won't give them full reviews, but we do want to talk about them in some way.
Yeah.
Brendan has a list. I have a list. Some of them are crossover. Some of them are individual to our respective list.
Yeah.
So I guess as we start here, Brendan, let's talk about the 3 films that you and I do crossover with here as far as our list goes.
And I feel like this might be the main bulk of this whole show because at least 2 of these were sort of slated as potential, end of the year movies. They want to be slated for possible awards conversation. Whether they end up there or not, I think is going to be what this conversation decides. Like we're the ones that decide that. No, we're not. But I think it'll be emblematic that it'll be emblematic of how I think they end up sitting for the rest of the year. But yes, the 3 that we have together are there's Nyad, starring Jodie Foster and Annette Bening, based on Diana Nyad, the real figure there who swam from, I think, Cuba to Florida, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe that is correct, yes.
Yeah. There's also The Burial from director Margaret Betts, starring Jamie Foxx and Tommy Lee Jones, which is available on Amazon Prime right now. Been available on Amazon Prime for a little while. So this is when we're getting to a little bit late, but I think
some of these will... We're getting
some of these may have been forgotten about from our listeners' perspective.
Yeah.
The next one we'll talk about, and I think we'll cap off these 3 with the latest from Taika Waititi, Next Goal Wins, which was going to be one we almost did a full review of, but just given the timing of everything, it's unfortunate that some have to be slated for a sort of a conversation like this and not be given the full dedicated review segment, but you got to be picky and choosy. And honestly, at this point, given the week at hand, Alexander Payne's The Holdovers and Rustin out this week, I think are more priorities at this point.
Definitely need to get to those.
I think there's going to be more to talk about with those than what we have to say here about these 3. So yes, Nyad, The Burial, and Next Goal Wins. I guess we can do it in that order. Does that sound good?
Sounds good to me. Yeah.
All right. So then we'll start with Nyad.
Yeah, we'll start with Nyad. As you noted, it is directed by Jimmy Chin, Elizabeth Chai, Vasarhaili.
I meant to look this up. Yeah,
that.
It's the same duo behind many National Geographic documentaries that we've come to love.
Awesome. Yeah.
Free Solo, The Rescue, Maru, I think is really underrated as well.
Really actually, that one
not really underrated. I think underseen maybe at this point, given the success of Free Solo, especially.
I agree. So their documentary work is fantastic.
Yeah.
And now here they are with a feature film, their first, starring Annette Bening and Jodie Foster, among others. Yeah. What did you think of Nyad?
And yeah, I was actually really anticipating this because sometimes when documentarians move away from documentaries to do narrative features, especially if these are documentarians that have a real interesting visual eye, I'm always interested to see what they do in a different narrative setting. So I was really interested in this, and I do think the story of Diana Nyad is really compelling. I was really interested in seeing what they could bring to this, and this is far from the worst movie of the year, but I think it might be the most disappointing for me. And I think a lot of it might come down to that directing duo here. I don't know if
Yeah.
they're out of their element tackling their first narrative feature, because I think their directorial flourishes are weirdly where the film is at its best and its worst simultaneously, sometimes even in the same scene.
Okay.
Like, there are sweeping oceanic shots and there's an overall sense of danger that I do think is very compelling. It is very thrilling. Definitely reminds me of the same natural vibes that you would have gotten from a movie like Free Solo, right?
Sure.
But they're also contrasted by moments of dreamlike abstraction, almost like magical realism that
Yeah.
I think veered dangerously close to self-parody. I I just they don't really work for me, and there's not a lot of that, but I think it's also just a big missed opportunity, not just from a directorial angle, but also the story itself feels it doesn't feel like there was a clear vision on the page as to why this story needed to be told. There are a lot of weird flashbacks as well to try and convey a different kind of message that may have been necessary, especially given Diana Nyad's history as a child. And I know the film wants to explore that for sure. Uh, but I don't know how well justified they are here, given the overarching goal of this heroic figure. It really does feel like a missed opportunity. Weirdly, the quieter moments between Annette Bening and Jodie Foster are where the film is at its best, when there's really just no additional flourish to overemphasize some of these things. When it's just two people in a room, these two great actresses talking to each other, that's really where it's at its best. And honestly, I think Jodie Foster kind of steals this movie. She's not playing the titular character, but she's in many ways the beating heart of it. And I do think she is really quite great. So I do think it is a missed opportunity, especially given the fact that I was really intrigued by this directing duo tackling a narrative feature. I think they could have brought something interesting. And at times they do, but at times I also don't think they do.
Yeah, I'm actually not too far off from you. I'm mixed on Nyad, and I do think that the directing duo here, I think they succumb to the whole idea of first-time directors and the ambition they envision for this movie. And I agree with you. I don't think the flashbacks are effective here. They are a little cheap. And some of that comes down to the fundamental ethos of this film and what it wants to be. Does it want to be a sports drama, or does it want to be some sort of character study? And look, some films are very good at having its cake and eating it too. Yeah. I think of something like Rush in that regard. Ron Howard's Rush, I think, is able to have its cake and eat it too. This is a film that suffers because it doesn't pick a lane. And I think as a result, not only does it fail in having its cake and eating it too, I don't think it's great in terms of picking one lane over the other. Now, I will say, as an examination on ambition and how that's funneled through friendship and togetherness, that is effective enough, primarily though, because of the performances.
Fair.
Jodie Foster is great. Annette Bening is very good. And their chemistry is magnetic. They're able to bring something here that I think overcomes the failings that's there on the page and the vision of this film from a directional perspective. As a drama, I think it leaves, as a sports drama specifically, I think it leaves a lot to be desired. A lot to be desired. Now, part of it is also the script here by Julia Cox, because I think the writing keeps the film pretty safe and middling. However, I think what's most disappointing, and again, I think this comes back to how this film wants to champion its central figure and this achievement that she achieved. The problem with that, though, is there is a lot of controversy surrounding Diana. Yeah. And especially this achievement. Yeah. This is an achievement that is not on the record as being successful. Yeah. this film doesn't really care to get into that all that much, if
It
at all.
it finds a very particular segment, but while still simultaneously at least acknowledging that other side of it, as if to almost contradict itself. Then,
Yeah,
and I don't
just
weirdly the emptiness on the page almost inadvertently creates that contradiction, right? The fact that this was a story about someone that failed in achievement and had to partake in this much later in life.
yeah,
But the failings of it and how that dwells on someone only feels kind of passively there. And I think it's only because of how many other moving parts are happening here, whether it be those extended flashback sequences, which are really jarring, not just narratively, but also cinematically. Like they have like this dreamlike kind of almost kaleidoscopic prism kind of view to them. And clearly it's the directors here trying to create them and envision them as if they're memories or something like that. But they're weirdly kind of distracting, and the way they move and come and go throughout the narrative feels almost like there's a disconnect there. So then that's on the directors here for not finding that seamlessness within the page to be able to be able to craft a good story. So it is very unfortunate then, given those missed opportunities. And even just as a sports drama about ambition, like you're saying, there is something potentially there. It just gets flooded, no water pun intended, with a bunch of other ideas that maybe don't even need to be there.
No, I very much do agree with that. And that's where I think having this film emphasizing the psychological aspect of Nyad's life could have been compelling. And I don't want to get stuck in the rabbit hole of this is what I would have done versus these directors.
Right.
However, I do think this film lacks a focus. And as it relates to Diana's psychological ambition, how she's affected by it, not just the failing of having this swim prior when she was in her youth. Now, as she's older, she's still ambitious and motivated to make this swim. That's one element that's fascinating. But even as it relates to these, these flashbacks, the film seems to infer that there is something between her and her swim coach when she was younger that is murky.
Yeah.
And how that affects who she is as an adult. And look, there's a lot to mind there that is tragic, that is fascinating, that's compelling.
Yeah.
And I think if the film would have been able to solidify that focus to, I guess, examine that psychological murkiness from what really happened to her when she was younger, how that affects her swimming now, how that affects her ambition to make the swim. What does that mean? Like, there's something really fascinating there, despite the controversies. Even if you remove that from the equation, there's still something really compelling there. But the lack of focus keeps this film from really reaching those depths, if you will.
Yeah, nice work.
Thank you. Because it wants to be a conventional sports drama at the same time. And those two things just don't mesh well here.
You're reminding me of another aspect of this movie with regard to trying to tie her past into her present that the film, I think, also fails to do. That through line between how her tragic history may be affecting her ambition now at age 60. Something else this film introduces is the fact that she always uses music to time her swims, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that could have been
there's a whole movie there.
Well, not even just that, but that could have been a really interesting directorial touch that this film could have had about trying to literally find some kind of musicality within the choreography of the swims, right? That's something that these directors could have potentially taken advantage of, but they merely tell us that. Like there's no sense of rhythm to it all.
Well, I wonder if part of that is budget. I don't know if they had access to an elite soundtrack.
I don't know.
Guess.
And of course, they're not going to turn this into a full-on musical. I understand that, but at the same time, it's just more emblematic of the film's overarching issue of not being able to find that focus you're talking about between her tragic past and her ambitious present. And I do think it's one of those cases where both aspects kind of need to be here. I understand why they're both here. It's, again, not the what, it's the how. We always talk about those two question marks there. Like it's not about what you're conveying, it's about how you do it. And the how is just severely miscalculated.
I completely agree. And I also think that it's a missed opportunity to completely, and maybe even arguably anyway, myopic to simply overlook the controversy, especially since this film narratively is all about her making this swim. Which by many accounts is something that was either cheated or didn't happen, depending on the evidence and how you interpret it. So I don't know why the film doesn't get into that more than it does. And again, I know the film wants to champion Diana. That's what this really is about.
It's based on her own book, so I get that.
And it's based on her own book, so I do get it. But I think there's a more compelling here where this character is much more conflicted and complicated than how this is trying to portray her as someone who's ambitious, but perhaps comes out more saintly than what it might be in reality. And that to me is, again, cinematically, dramatically, I just feel like there's a missed opportunity there. But when you're making a movie based off of her book, that's the only perspective you're going to get here.
It's and she, that means that she's basically helping to fund this thing. So clearly she has a story that she wants to be viewed. She wants to be viewed a certain way, and I get that. It's
kind of like the Queen biopic issue, the whole Bohemian Rhapsody. We have to make ourselves look good, so we're not really going to dig into the controversies here.
Thankfully, there's nothing quite as on the nose as Diana and Nyad walking into a party and saying, "Oh no, I gotta get home to my husband and kids. I can't do cocaine with you right now."
It's not that bad. You're right. It's not nearly that egregious. I do 1,000% agree with that. You know, this film's version of it is simply
brushing it off.
Brushing off the controversies that, again, in the real world are quite severe. Which is still, not a great look, but
it's not a great look, but
movie.
I get it.
What are you going to
do? And you liked Annette Bening's performance here overall, right?
I do like her. I think she taps into this abrasive quality. And again, this is where it's still a little bit different than why the comparison to Bohemian Rhapsody isn't quite apples to apples, because I do think that despite the film brushing off the controversy, there's still a prickly nature to Diana. She's ambitious. She's not afraid to speak her mind. She comes off, I don't know how to phrase it other than she's a little bit of an asshole at times. And I do like that a lot. And it comes through very well in Bening's performance. I love that the film isn't afraid to depict her ambition in such a brazen way. And
as a flaw, which I do respect.
As a flaw, absolutely. And to see how these characters react to it, I think is equally compelling, and not just Jodie Foster, but some of these others as well. But yes, Foster in many ways steals this film, and I love how she constantly is championing and encouraging Diana, but Bonnie will also, metaphorically speaking, punch Diana back when needed. And in order to have your ambition of this level succeed, you need someone like that in your corner. And I think Jodie Foster taps into that wonderfully as Bonnie here. So the performances here I think are very good.
There were admittedly a few moments regarding Annette Bening's performance, particularly some of the louder moments that feel like they're going for some kind of Oscar moment, right? That I didn't fully buy into it. And maybe it's because I started to sense that there was maybe a hidden agenda with this movie as more of a vehicle to finally get Annette Bening an Oscar win. and they were really trying to push for that. And I don't know if that was the case. I'm only theorizing, but there are moments where it feels like that seems like the goal with making this movie. And there are a few moments here, especially during the big, more dramatic moments where she's yelling and screaming and crying, where it just seems as though, okay, we're trying to push for some gold here. We're really trying to go for
it's
that.
a little Oscar baity in that way, sure.
Yeah.
I don't disagree, and that's why it's a performance that doesn't strike me as one of the best of the year.
I'm with you.
But for what this film is, I think it's more than adequate.
And honestly, those loud moments where it did admittedly take me out of the movie a bit. That's maybe, I don't know, like not even 30% of her performance. So it's not the majority of it.
Yeah.
But again, it kind of does represent some of the film's biggest problems, that the goal here and the agenda here of making it did seem a little clouded. It didn't seem like there was a clear vision or purpose outside of just wanting to create a sports drama outside of Diana Nyad's accomplishment, or loose term accomplishment, and the story that she already wrote in her book, and trying to convey it that way. That's really all it was.
I agree. And perhaps that adds to what we were saying earlier about the lack of conviction with this film and focus.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we move on to the next film?
I think so. I think when we tried to decipher an order between these three, I said The Burial should be second, but maybe we should do another sports drama after this just to keep the theme going. So maybe we do Next Goal Wins instead. We'll do that one next.
Sure. Yeah, we can do Next Goal Wins. What's fascinating about this movie is that it exists. It's a little bit, not quite as belligerent, but a little bit of the Avatar 2 thing. This film was announced in 2019. Okay? 2019.
Yeah.
This film is announced by Fox Searchlight Pictures. At some point during the next year or two, obviously COVID hits in 2020. It is shot, and it was supposed to originally come out, I think, in 2021, and then pushed to 2022, and then pushed to early 2023, and then pushed again to November of this year.
Yeah.
So it finally comes out after having like 6 release dates. But we're here. We're finally here.
I have a theory onto why it has so many pushbacks.
Okay, we'll certainly talk about it. Directed by Taika Waititi and starring Michael Fassbender, among many, many more.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Moss having a small little role in here.
Yeah.
All right, Brendan, what did you think about Next Goal Wins?
This is also a true story, much like Nyad. There is a documentary, if I'm not mistaken, also called Next Goal Wins.
Yes.
I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
Nope, I have not seen it.
Well, I heard it was pretty good. So I don't have the basis of comparison. I also don't have the basis of fact, because from what I understand, I do think there are some manipulations made with the story here to be a bit more, let's just say a bit more Taika Waititi, obviously, right?
Which the film admits in the opening frame.
It does.
Which I do respect.
I don't necessarily respect the execution of that, but I like the idea. My theory as to why this kept getting pushed back, and I don't know if we're going to see eye to eye on this one. I just don't think this movie is very good. I really don't. I think the biggest issue is that I just don't think it feels like a movie. The movie feels like a sketch, a series of sketches. And we're at a point now where I feel like Taika Waititi he's too busy getting into Taika Waititi's way when making his own movies. Because like the way this film is briskly paced, the way it flows, the way certain things land and certain things don't, the overall feel of it really reminded me of Thor: Love and Thunder. Like it had a very similar choppiness to it. Now, granted, I do think this is a better movie simply because it has a much better central performance. It has a really fascinating story at play, and I like the inclusivity of this particular culture at the very least. Even if Waititi is certainly making light of certain things, but I think at the very least there was a really potentially interesting sports movie here. And there are scenes where it does come through. I think in the third act, there are moments where I can sense, okay, I get why this movie was made in this way. I sense the justification for even a moment. But there's a journey getting there that just it feels very choppy and almost incomplete. In a way that, like I said, it really reminded me of Thor: Love and Thunder. It's almost astounding that it just didn't flow in the same way that some of Waititi's best films used to, like Hunt for the Wilder People or even Boy, some of his earlier films there. I think he had a really good sense of comedic flow and surprise. And even Jojo Rabbit, I'm growing on that film quite a bit as time goes on. I actually kind of like Jojo Rabbit. But they felt like movies to me. They had an arc, they had a journey, and they got to some kind of emotional payoff. There was an emotional core to those movies that this one is certainly going for. I just think Waititi gets in his own way too much.
Okay, I think that's very fair. I did like this movie.
Okay,
I
good.
enjoyed it. I do think that some of it comes down to perspective. I think Taika Waititi, as a comedian, as an artist, as a filmmaker, he has a very specific sensibility that you either respond to or you don't, or at least by this point in his career, maybe you just find a little tiresome and irksome. And I do understand if that is your response to something like Next Goal Wins. However, and maybe my perspective is influenced by how I have responded to his Thor movies, particularly Love and Thunder and Ragnarok, which I don't like particularly very much. I think the Thor stuff in those movies are pretty good, but as movies, they're very uneven, very messy. And I don't think that they serve the MCU, the larger MCU, well at all in any way, shape, or form. However, I think Waititi outside of the MCU is a pretty good filmmaker, even if his style is one note, as I noted, and either you respond to it or you don't. But Boy, Hunt for the Wilder People, I think are very good movies.
I agree.
Like them a lot. Jojo Rabbit, I don't love, but I like it enough. Again, primarily because of the Waititi sensibilities of it. I think narratively, that film gets in its own way a little bit.
Yeah, but there's at least still a sweetness to that one that I sometimes really get drawn into.
Absolutely. My biggest issue maybe with Jojo Rabbit, it's a little bit twofold. I understand why he does it, but at the same time, I think it's Taika Waititi, the actor, that is maybe miscast there. I know some people have really talked about that a lot in recent years, and I do understand that. But I think on the whole, it's a good movie. So I will certainly take that over his Thor films for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Have you seen Eagle versus Shark? I think that was his first movie.
Nope, haven't seen that one.
I haven't seen that one either.
Yeah. Anyway, that is to say, Next Goal Wins I like because I think outside of the MCU, Taika gets to really indulge in his own ethos. And I think there's a lot of fun to be had there. I really do. He's having fun with this story. He's very open about his objectives. And this film has a heart that is very transparent. It is not trying to hide its goals. It's this uplifting underdog story, and it doesn't sway from that at all. Again, the film is very brazen in that regard. And I do appreciate and respect that the film isn't trying to be anything other than what it is. However, I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying in terms of structure. This film works best, and again, circling it back to perspective, it might not be fair to look at the film this way because it is technically a narrative feature.
Yeah.
So maybe this is cheating. But I think this film works best if you look at it more like What We Do in the Shadows. If you think of it as more of a behind the scenes, kind of goofy documentary, pseudo documentary, in that same vein, I think it's much more effective because it's more of a series of gags than it is a conventional narrative script. And as
yeah.
a movie, does that leave something to be desired? Yes. Does it have an emotional payoff? Yes and no. I think the emotional payoff is arguably very contrived, but again, I think it still might work because the film is trying to, like, it's wearing its emotion on its sleeve. It's wearing its objectives on its sleeve. But yeah, there's not much narrative structure here. It's just going from one gag to the next and allowing these actors to indulge in whatever the next sketch is. So functionally, in terms of form, I think it's way more What We Do in the Shadows than anything else. Again, maybe that's cheating, but as I was sitting in the theater, that's how I thought of it. That's how I viewed it.
Well, that's interesting because I did actually think of What We Do in the Shadows while watching this, and that was why I didn't care for it that much because I at least with What We Do in the Shadows, the kind of like the sketchy nature of that movie was very clear. And it was kind of baked into that film's DNA that it still lent itself to be a rather smooth experience. And with regard to Next Goal Wins, I kind of felt this push and pull between sketch work and narrative feature trying to collide. Like I felt like it was trying to do both.
It's that. No, you're not wrong. It is
and,
those
and
two
that
things.
that was really the big thing that really kept me from really engaging with it. So it was like it's kind of similar to how we talk about some MCU films, especially those from Taika Waititi that are building to something serious and then they're undercut by a joke. And I feel like that's happening a lot here with Next Goal Wins, where it's trying to build to some kind of moment of not necessarily catharsis, but a moment of at least emotional understanding, only to then get cut short by some type of gag. And it happens a lot. And it's kind of one of those cases where I do feel like Waititi could have, or maybe should have picked a lane a little bit more clearly between those two extremes. I'm not really sure. It was just, there was a tug of war going on there for me.
See, that's maybe where we'll disagree the most here. I did not feel that at all. In any way, shape, or form. I don't think this film is building to anything significant. There are two moments. There are two moments where the film genuinely kind of raises its eyebrows a little bit to tug at the heartstrings in a real way. One of them takes place in a bathroom. And I think that moment is genuinely very good. I think it's great. Maybe it's the performances of it.
I was just going to say it's purely the performances. It's not just Michael Fassbender, but let's call out Kaimana, who plays Jaya in that moment, right?
Very good.
Very, very good.
Yeah, no, I
agree. The whole movie.
But the film, to give Taika some credit, he does not undermine that sequence with a joke or a gag or anything of the sort. Like it ends with a gesture from Thomas and it's sincere. And he walks out of the bathroom and that's it. That's how it ends. And then the other moment is with Thomas and his halftime speech. Yeah. Now, I do think that maybe because of the film's form, I don't know if the film emotionally earns this. There is clearly something that is affecting Thomas. We see him very aggressively, palpably angry throughout the film. And a lot of the time, it is a gag. It is the film using it as humor. However, when that facade is removed and we see him get tender and honest, and that's kind of the point of this moment, right? Because he's been told the reason the players don't respond to you is that they don't know you. You've built up this wall. You're very angry. You yell and you scream, and they don't know you. And the film absolutely had demonstrated that throughout the film incessantly. So it makes sense despite the uneven form of the film, but it does make sense in how it builds to, okay, now I have to get vulnerable. And he tells this absolutely heartbreaking, tragic story that, again, is maybe mostly effective because of Fassbender, but the film doesn't undermine that with a joke either.
No, it doesn't.
The only two times I feel like this film gets serious in any real way, Taika does a good job of letting those moments be themselves. Any other time this film was quote unquote getting serious, I never felt that it was carrying any weight whatsoever. Like to me, it was all a gag.
Well, I guess it's
throughout the whole thing.
and I guess it's less about maybe the seriousness versus the comedic, and more so the sketchiness versus the narrative flow of it. Like it almost like there are times it felt like, okay, is this trying to be a movie, or are they literally just winking at the camera right now? And how are they? Why are they trying to do both? And that's the tug of war I think that I felt even more, because those two scenes I do think are mostly effective because of how you look at them in a vacuum. Whether they work in the context of the film in totality, I'm with you. I don't know if they do. I think that first one in the bathroom does, because it potentially works as like a turning point for the film. Having it happen midway through, it could potentially help solidify that this is where the film is changing its pace a little bit.
And you think about that relationship specifically and how it evolves. I mean, it opens with a gag for sure. And I don't, okay, the comedy will certainly be subjective. However, what's more interesting, despite the introduction, is how Thomas completely regards her name.
Yeah.
And then there's a reconvening of that relationship that I think is, again, genuine, funny, and how they regroup and come together to find other players. And then it leads to that moment in the bathroom. So like that relationship evolves, I think, in a really wonderful way.
I agree.
I think the film really does earn it. To me, the reveal of Thomas and the tragedy, I go back and forth on it because it does seemingly come out of nowhere, but all the clues I do think are there. The
clues are there in Fassbender's performance. Yeah, yes. A lot of people are comparing this movie to Ted Lasso, and I certainly get it because Ted Lasso, especially, I know, but if you do watch season 2 of Ted Lasso, there's a moment midway, maybe 2/3 of the way through that season, where it starts to peel the onion back and sort of strip back the overall, I guess, politeness of Ted himself, and how he's so overjoyed all of the time and so forgiving all of the time, and there actually is some back-rooted pain there. Yeah, basically just change that to anger and you have Thomas in this movie.
It is the same thing. You're right.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason why that scene at the end maybe doesn't work in totality with the film, it's the same problems that most sports movies have that have a huge team, and you don't really get a chance to know enough of the players to, I guess, make that moment feel, like that relationship between Thomas and these other players. And the film is at least attempting to build some kind of camaraderie, not just with the team as a whole, but with individual players. Like they have different quirks and different dynamics with Thomas. And I kind of wonder, is only maybe 3 or 4 players enough? And I know that's a really hard thing to do, but
movies, it's hard to get beyond that.
But when you're going for a big moment like that, sometimes I think you need to do a little bit more work on the individual front there. I mean, a movie like Friday Night Lights does it very well. There are at least 10 characters in that movie where they almost feel like main characters.
But to be fair, really that's effective. A film that is trying to be, I hate to say it pretentiously, but is trying to be a lot more serious and deft with its drama. Yeah. This film is goofy as all get out and maintains that level of, goofiness throughout a lot of the film. Like there isn't really, like, it's quote unquote serious moments are limited, I'll say. Like, again, the moments he has with Jaya, I think, are genuine, like when they're trying to reconnect. Yeah. But it's brief. It's effective, but then we move on to the next gag, and we move on to the next plot beat that just really involves a lot more humor. But I do think the clues are all there, and not even just in some of the footage that we see, like when he's throwing chairs and whatnot, but again, the clues with his daughter and the voicemails that we hear. It is very Ted Lasso. Like, that is a very apt comparison. That's exactly what it is when that facade is undercut and we come to see what the real root of it is. There's a poignancy to it that Fassbender gives his full commitment to. Really,
he does. Yeah.
And I think he makes it work. The tug of war you're talking about, though, I do think is there because And that's why I called it cheating, because, and I understand why it is viewed that way, or why I'll get pushback on it, because it is cheating. It is functioning mostly as a narrative feature, but in form it isn't. Like the script is working as I guess a comedic, narrative feature, but
Sure.
from scene to scene, that's not how Taika is treating it. He's treating it more like What We Do in the Shadows. It's more documentary-esque style, where he's trying to be in on the joke. And again,
which is ironic considering that this already exists as a documentary.
Exactly. No, very, very much so. So like, that's, I say all that to say, I guess I enjoyed the film. Is it one of his best films? No. Is it one of the best movies of the year? No.
No.
This is probably still 3 stars on Letterboxd for me. Like, it's perfectly fine. Like, it's not great, but I don't think it's the worst thing I've ever seen either. Like, it's
it's
right
not
in
one of the
middle.
worst movies of the year. But yeah, it sounds like maybe you're a little bit higher on it than I am, just given the fact that tug of war bothered me a little bit more. But you also said something during your thoughts that I did realize might be a pretty good point, and it is something I did think about while watching the movie, and I just haven't acknowledged it yet. Is it possible that Taika Waititi's style and sense of humor is maybe just starting to wear on me a little bit?
I think that's fair.
That is possible.
I think it is very possible. I think it's indicative in the reviews even.
Yeah.
Because it's hard for me to just sit here on its own. And again, maybe I'm wearing maybe agenda is the wrong phrase, but like maybe I'm also influenced because of his work in the MCU, which I just don't like very much. And there's something about that style making its way into something so completely different that for Taika, I did find refreshing, that maybe that seeps into my thoughts here. And I'm willing to admit that might be the case.
Possibly.
Because the reviews have been very middling. This is like 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, something like that.
I think it's a 44 on Metacritic right now.
Yeah, it's not great. And I kind of wonder if some of it is the tug of war that we're talking about. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I also wonder if some of it is just people are tired of the shtick. And
maybe.
I don't think that's unfair.
Yeah,
really.
But the shtick got so heightened and overemphasized because of those 2 Thor movies. Like the shtick kind of became a character trait that was definable with not just Taika Waititi, but with almost the rest of the MCU after Thor Ragnarok set a new standard for how comedic they could be. And the fact that tone still kind of bleeds into this movie, maybe that's why people are sick of it. Not just because of Waititi, but because Marvel's also been ripping him off ever since.
Maybe. I mean, look, I do empathize with it. I still enjoy it. I think, like, again, on its own terms, and maybe it's because I look back at, Hunt for the Wilder People, which I love, or the aforementioned What We Do in the Shadows, I think is absolutely masterful. Like, that's still one of my favorite mockumentaries I've seen. Like, it's easy to be tired of him because of how big he's gotten, and now there's talk of him doing a Star Wars movie, and he's been everywhere, it seems, and a lot of people are mixed on Jojo Rabbit, and there was the whole Oscar campaigning with all of that, and and him being in the hunt for writing for that movie. Yeah. So look, I understand people's polarization on Taika, but I think outside the MCU and outside of award season, I think there's fun to be had there. And I think there's fun to be had with this film. Is it slight? Yes. Is it pandering? Absolutely. Is it brazen and very aware of what it is? Yes. Like, it's not trying to be anything other than this goofy comedy about this incredible underdog story, where, and it's not as if this team like came out of the shadows and went on to qualify for the World Cup, and they won one game. Like, they scored 2 goals.
They went from rank 204 to like 164. Like that was the success of this story.
Which is, look, and given that context, that's incredible. Like, you know, I understand why, especially given the culture of American Samoa, and I love how the film taps into all of that to have fun, but also be representative of something that's new and different for a lot of people. And again, like, I love how, to me, the film, and like, maybe I'm way off on this. I don't know. I'm not, clearly, I'm not American Samoan. I'm not from there. I've never been there. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it seems to me as if the film is at least trying for, whether it gets there or not, I'd have to do some research or someone can reach out. But the film seems as if it's, yes, having fun and being playful, but showing reverence to this story and the people of American Samoa.
It's definitely not a mockery.
It's
at least
not making fun
it doesn't
of it.
feel like a mockery.
It's trying to be a celebration of this story, and it's doing it in such an endearing and fun and transparent way. This is not a film. This is not Jojo Rabbit aiming for Oscars. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's just not. So, like, yes, it's not the greatest film I've seen, but it's far from the worst too.
Yeah.
So that's where I stand on it. I don't know. I can't, there's nothing else I have.
I will say I am interested in watching the documentary now, because the story here is fascinating. It is really fascinating.
For sure. All right. Shall we move on to the burial?
Sure. And I think it's actually nicely organized from us here, JD, because between Nyad, Next Goal Wins, and the burial, we kind of have 3 films that have pretty similar thematic arcs. Really movies about like overcoming tragedy for some sort of ambitious intent. So they, like, saying it that vaguely, all these movies do kind of tie together. There are parallels for sure. Could we spoil it? I think we're saving the best one for last year.
Of these 3 for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. We are.
Yeah. Definitely do agree with that. The Burial, directed by Maggie Betts, starring Jamie Foxx and Tommy Lee Jones, among a few others. Bill Camp, Journey Smollett in the film as well. All right, Brendan, you've already spoiled it, but what are your thoughts on The Burial?
Yeah, I kind of dug this one. It's very. You called Next Goal Wins slight, and there is a slightness to The Burial as well, because there is an almost 90s like energy to it. And I've seen that comparison thrown out a lot. A lot of critics out there have said this feels almost like a 90s inspirational drama. And it's not even just a 90s drama that would have come out in theaters. It almost feels like a 90s drama that would have just simply aired on TV. Like
you would have certainly have caught this on TV if not in theaters.
Absolutely. Yeah, you would have. Not a bad thing, just a thing. And it weirdly gave me this sense of nostalgia. I don't know if that was the film's intent. So maybe I'm liking this movie more because of that nostalgia, that it reminded me of something I would have watched at age 5 on like TNT as like a TNT original movie or something like that. But it's done with so much conviction and passion and sincerity that I just went with it. It's mostly due to these performances. Jamie Foxx really should be getting some serious consideration here. As far as like, I don't know if he'll end up being one of my top 5 favorite lead actor performances of the year, but I kind of would love to see his name floating around the conversation more. I think he is magnetic in this movie. He's so good. He's so good here. I love his relationship with Tommy Lee Jones. I love their dynamic. I love really everyone in this movie. And the way the film does play with the racial ramifications, especially within the 90s. The 90s almost feel like a character here because it does take place in 1995. So you see a lot of footage of Johnny Cochran and O.J. Simpson, for instance. So that's very much like the setting here and the sense of place is a character here. And the way it's utilizing that sense of racial despondency in the 1990s and how that fed into history, or how history tended to forget about certain demographics over the years, especially in Mississippi and the southern areas like that. I think the film has a lot of respect for that, and I think it does it pretty well. So this is kind of one of those hidden gems of the year. It's not one of the best films of the year, but if you're scouting through Amazon Prime and you see this one, this is worth watching because it's one of those movies I think I don't think anyone can come out and just say, "Oh, that sucked. That was terrible." This is this is just a warm and inviting movie, a warm and inviting courtroom drama that's just very energetic to watch.
Yeah, so I quite like this as well. And I think the best way to articulate its sleight of hand and and how, as you noted, how warm and inviting it is when you put it through the lens that this film is about contract law. That's what it's about. A contract dispute.
Yeah. And it's interesting.
On its face, that sounds absolutely banal and mundane, but you're right. I mean, it's surprisingly very magnetic and quite captivating. And a lot of it comes through in these performances. I completely agree with you. Jamie Foxx is electric here. Absolutely demands your attention when he's on screen. This is one of those quote unquote loud performances that I love, where he just has an energy and a vibe that you can't look away from. And I think it's also kind of funny because while the film is about contract law, his character of Willie isn't a contract lawyer. He's a personal injury attorney. And those guys have, let's say, a reputation all on their own.
Yeah,
you know,
for
which
sure.
certainly adds some fun levity to it as well, especially when you throw in all of the flash that he brings to the courtroom. That opening sequence is quite wonderful. I do love that. It sets the tone very well. And it contradicts everything that Tommy Lee Jones is doing as Jeremiah here, where he's very quiet, reserved, but feels very passionate about why he wants to take this guy to court. He has a conviction because this business of his means everything to him. It was passed down to him from his father, from his grandfather, and he wants to make sure that his children are able to maintain it. So the stakes are very high for Jeremiah. And it's interesting how he becomes connected to Willie despite the contrast between them that are galaxies apart.
Oh,
Just galaxies apart in terms of personalities and background. And yet they do find a way to work together. And that on its own terms, as obvious as it is, there's something about the world we live in today where that message still feels extremely necessary. So the film might be a little bit slight in places. It's not going to end up on my top 20 or anything like that, but it's very good, and its messaging somehow still packs a punch. And maybe it's primarily because of the world we live in, but there's something about them coming together and exposing what they did that feels a little John Oliver-y. That I just kind of love.
Well, I think you're getting at something as to why this film does provide a pretty emotional and thematic punch. And it got me thinking while watching it. About 2/3 of the way through, I thought to myself, why is a movie like this really working for me? But then movies, let's say like Green Book, for instance, came with a huge set of problems, because Green Book's another movie that taps into some, I guess, high-level racial themes and injustices. It's also a movie that feels like it came from the 1990s. It kind of has a similar sense of crowd pleasability to it. But I think the difference is a movie like Green Book is also made with a lot of unwarranted self-importance. Whereas a movie like The Burial, what makes it so brilliant is the fact that it doesn't have that sense of self-importance. It's very sincere in its convictions, but it also does something pretty interesting that makes it almost timely in a meta way. There's a moment where Tommy Lee Jones, as Jeremiah O'Keefe, takes the stand as a witness and is questioned about his history turning down the Ku Klux Klan from partaking in protests in his territory. I think that's when he was functioning as mayor at that time. And by doing that, the movie is weirdly deconstructing the white savior trope that we tend to see in movies like this. And I found that really interesting too. So the fact that there's kind of a meta component here, as if to maybe inadvertently or directly, I'm not sure if the intent is there, to basically like deconstruct a common trope that we would see in a movie like this that keeps bringing up the argument in a negative way. I think is sort of what helps the movie a little bit. Like it works in its favor, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting, that whole component of the film. I mean, the idea that Willie is coming in to essentially be the savior for Jeremiah in and of itself deconstructs, or at least it's
a lot of irony there.
Yeah, the antithesis of that trope for sure. But I do agree with you. It's handled with great diligence. And I do love how the film treats it with sincerity instead of having that self-importance. And I also love that for Willie, it is a little bit complicated, right? He makes choices in this film that are questionable. And some of it comes down to knowing the conviction of Jeremiah, turning away the KKK, and then using that to put Jeremiah on the stand before he was ready to, which leads to conflict where Willie's team, because of some of the racial ambiguity, I guess, at play, at least at that time, they left. Like his team left. They were done with it. And it just became personal for Willie and Jeremiah at that point. It's like everything faded. And again, despite the personality contrast between the two, they found a way to still go to court and battle through the adversity that they were facing. And, you know, even though, again, Willie not a contract lawyer by any means, and Jeremiah could have went out to find someone else, but there's something about Willie that in the end, he still believed in. And, you know, there's something about it that, as I don't know, as obvious as it seems, it just carries weight, I think.
Obviousness is not the problem here. And there's no problem with that at all. So obviousness in and of itself is not a problem when it comes to movies. If you do it with conviction and diligence and you believe in it and you sense that believability and care, then the movie's going to work. And that's more or less what happens here. And it really all comes down to this depiction of the familial, how both Jeremiah and Willie's respective families and upbringings find a common ground with this case, and how this corporate entity is without realizing it, this corporate entity and their business handlings are affecting families. And that's sort of determined 2/3 of the way through the film when we actually see Jeremiah hanging out with Willie's own family. I think he meets his mother at one point, and there's a really tender moment there. And there's a wonderful history lesson overlooking the fields and how they call it a cemetery, because it's been burying over ancestors and no one even knows that they're there at this point. It's kind of metaphorically spoken about, but it could also be pretty literal at the same time too. So the way the film treats the familial, I think, is where that obviousness comes from. But it's the good kind of obviousness. It's the kind that you need to relate to. So that's where that common ground comes from. I think it's really touching.
I completely agree. Do like some of the other performances as well. Want to shout out Bill Camp for living up to his name, because there are some really great moments here.
I had no idea he was in this movie, and the second I saw his face pretty early on, I thought, "Oh, thank God, Bill Camp is in this movie." Whenever he shows up, I just grin. I just grin every time I see him.
So good. There's a moment after he is on the stand when he meets his lawyers in the office, and it's great. It's so good. So good. But yeah, really like this film quite a lot.
I do
Definitely
too.
One that I encourage people to go and check out. And it's available right now on Amazon Prime.
Absolutely.
All right, Brennan, let's get to some coffee. We need to drink it.
Oh, it's the holiday season, man. Good tasting coffee around a good fireplace. That's the dream.
Best.
That's the dream.
It's the best. And if you want to drink the best coffee in the world, you need to check out Coffee Cult, because they source only specialty grade Arabica coffee beans from all over the world, really.
Yeah.
And the difference between Coffee Cult and other coffee companies are it's the beans. The quality of the beans are unmatched. A lot of other companies will use specialty grade coffee,
Yeah.
but they don't go through and pick out just the good ones. You will get some mediocre specialty grade. You'll get some great beans. You'll get some really terrible beans. They don't sift through them. And so you get
Yeah. Yeah.
a weird concoction of coffee beans that will be good, but maybe not great. Coffee Cult does the opposite of that. They will pick out the bad ones. They only take the highest grade beans possible. That's all they roast exclusively.
That's
so
great.
The quality with Coffee Cult is just unmatched. It's all ethically sourced. It's roasted to order. So the coffee is not just sitting around in some warehouse. They wait for your order to come in. They put that
so
into the
good.
computer system, and then it's roasted.
So fresh, so good.
So fresh every single time. And speaking of the holiday season right now,
yeah.
they have a holiday blend that you'll want to go and check out. It's one of my very favorite coffees that I've ever had. I love the holiday blend. For you bourbon drinkers out there, they have
That's
a new
me.
product. They have a bourbon barrel aged dark roast that used authentic Willett and Four Roses barrels
Nice.
that aged the coffee for several months, hand crafting it every single day.
Oh man, that better be all over the state of Kentucky right now.
I know, it really should be. It's really
Yeah.
great coffee for the bourbon drinkers out there. And finally, I've been waiting for this. They finally got Ethiopian Harar back. And this
Nice.
might be my favorite coffee on the planet. It is so good. When I say that this coffee tastes like blueberries, it is drinking a blueberry muffin. That's what it tastes like.
Nice.
It is unbelievable how good this coffee is. It is really sweet, really fruity. It's incredible. It is a dessert coffee through and through. And definitely want people to go and check that out. So go to coffeecult.com, coffee with a K, cult with a K. Use our code ISF and you'll get 15% off. Again, that code is ISF and you'll get 15% off. That's coffeecult.com. It is the holiday season, as we talked about at the beginning of the show.
Toys, gifts, stuff,
gifts, merchandise. That's
clothing.
what you should look into
Yeah.
with the InSession Film store, because we have all kinds of fun t-shirts available. If you want to check out some of the Brandon merchandise that we have there, we have Barbie inspired t-shirts, Star Wars inspired. We got I'm wearing the.
I was gonna say, stand up. Let's see a little Michael Shannon in that. Look at that beauty.
Shannon
Look at that thing.
there.
Look at
I
that.
got the Michael Shannon Midnight Special one.
Yeah.
We have a La La Land Moonlight t-shirt that you might want to check out.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And all of these designs come with other things like magnets and stickers and phone cases, all kinds of fun stuff. So go
Mugs.
to InSession Film, mugs, absolutely.
Yeah, that's how you can drink your
InSession
coffee
Film.
cold.
Exactly. InSessionFilm.com/store is where you can check that out, or go straight to TeePublic at tpublic.com/store/InSessionFilm. But yeah, it's the best time of year. Black Friday's coming up. I know they have a ton of Black Friday deals, so you can get t-shirts at $15, I think.
That's amazing.
So now is a great time to go and check all of that out. Again, tpublic.com/store/InSessionFilm, or simply go to InSessionFilm.com/store. Get your gifts for the holiday season. All right, where do you want to go next? I know you have a few others, or at least one more you want to get to. On
I don't. Well, I was gonna try and get to one additional one, which was a horror movie called When Evil Lurks that I know you've had a chance to see.
I was thinking of The Exorcist. Did you want to speak to that at all?
Do I
or
have
no?
to talk about that?
You don't. No.
See, this is. I forgot that I even brought that one up to you. Like
Yeah.
that's how much I keep forgetting. But I hate it. I hate this movie.
Okay.
It's a fundamental misunderstanding of not just The Exorcist itself, but just in how you make a horror film. It's not good. I don't have the energy for it. I can't do it, JD. I just can't.
Okay.
I actually I went back and revisited some other Exorcist films after seeing Believer, just to think like, is this really the worst one? Like how can this be the worst one of them all? Thankfully, I don't think it is, because remember that one called Exorcist: The Beginning that came out in 2004? That
Yeah.
which actually was a reworking of the Paul Schrader film Dominion. Like the history of those two films, it's not a director's cut. It's fascinating how both of them exist. They're like there was a movie that was shot and edited and finished and was not released because it got poor test screenings. So it was completely redone, and that's the version that got in theaters, Exorcist: The Beginning. And it got terrible reviews. So then the studios were like, you know what? We have Dominion. Let's release this as a director's cut and put it out here a year later. And they did.
And that's what they did.
Yeah. Like it's even recast. There are different actors in the same roles. The only one is Stellan Skarsgård as the lead. He's still in that. Anyway, I'm not getting down a tangent here on the Exorcist franchise. But the point is that David Gordon Green made one of, if not the worst, Exorcist films. It's not good. It's really not good.
All right. Well, I will be avoiding that. It was my biggest fear when we were talking about it earlier in the year. I don't know if I can trust him with horror franchises after what he did to Halloween. And it appears our fears have been validated. Okay, so I have a few more on my list. I'll try to get through them as quickly as I can. I won't go into all of them, but I do at least want to talk about a few of them here. One of them is this movie on Netflix called Wingwomen. This is a French action film from Melanie Laurent. She directed this film. She stars in it, but also directed it. And it stars Adele Exarchopoulos.
Your girl.
Adele Exarchopoulos is in this as well.
Yeah.
Brendan, at the InSession Film Awards, we have a category called Best Surprise Movie.
It's reserved for movies like this, right?
And it is reserved for movies like this. I don't know if it's going to win that category for me this year, but it's probably the top contender for me.
Wow.
I really liked this film a lot. It's gotten mixed reviews, so it's hard to say if this will work for everybody, but I loved it. I really loved it. And I think the reason why, it comes down to a couple of things. One, the performances here, I think, are really, really good, but they tether to the other important factor for me, and this is something that we've already talked about with some of these other movies. It's the sincerity of this movie.
Okay.
This is an action comedy, so it does have these spy action sequences, if you will, that I think are mostly staged well. Although I will admit it was a little jarring because I haven't seen all of Melanie Laurent and Adele Exarchopoulos' movies, but I don't know them from being in action movies, especially Exarchopoulos. So there's something about them being in this world that is a little jarring to me.
That's fair. Yeah.
But essentially, Laurent is a spy heist thief, if you will, that's been around for quite some time. And she wants to retire. And she's in a relationship with the Exarchopoulos character, who we come to find out that she ran away from home when she was younger. She ran into Laurent's character on a job when she was actually stealing some diamonds. And she saw herself in Exarchopoulos' character of Alex. Laurent plays a character of Carol here.
Yeah.
And she sees a lot of herself in Alex. So they become partners and ultimately lovers as well. And where this film picks up is they do a heist. There's some action and some fun. It goes well, but Carol wants out. And in order to get out, she has to go to a boss, as one does in these movies.
Yeah.
And tells her, I want out, but the boss, Moraine here, is not having it. You can't, you're in too deep, she says. So thus is the conflict, right?
Sure.
The boss needs her to stay, but she wants out. So in order to get out, they got to pull off one last job. They got to.
Oh, okay. It's a one last job kind of movie. I'm a sucker for those kind of movies. I weirdly am.
Absolutely. And so the structure is simple. And what I love about the simplicity of it is that it allows Laurent as a storyteller and as an actress with Exarchopolis, and also Manon Bresch here, who plays Sam, because eventually this trio forms. But it allows these performers to really dig into the nuances of their characters and really fully develop who these characters are. And I'm telling you, like, the blend of drama and comedy here is brilliant. This film is blisteringly funny at times. It's hilarious. And Exarchopolis, maybe it's just because, you see her in something like Blue is the Warmest Color earlier in the year. Yeah. I saw her in Passages, and we talked about that here on the show. And, she's really good at engaging you in these very dramatic and emotionally riveting ways. And in some of the smaller work we've seen her in recent years, it's a little bit of the same as well. Yeah. This is her being full on Ocean's trilogy.
That sounds awesome. That sounds really awesome.
Characters. Like this is kind of like, in terms of style and tone, it is the French Ocean's 11 in a way. It's not quite Soderbergh-esque. So I don't want people thinking, don't expect the exact same thing. Yeah, but for sure. Stylistically, there's similar comparisons to be had there. And Exarchopolis, Brad Pitt and everyone, Matt Damon and everyone in those movies, there's this incredible vibrancy to the character. Again, it's very funny, but unlike Soderbergh, although I think Soderbergh does this well in a subtle way in the Ocean Trilogy, this film gets more overtly emotional in the end. I don't want to give it away what happens. Okay. But this is where Exarchopolis is just so goddamn brilliant, because throughout the film, you're incredibly engaged, and, the humor of this film, the dialogue and the banter between her and Carol is great. But in particular, Alex and Sam, there's like this rivalry that is formed, and it's very brazen. It's very snarky. Alex doesn't trust Sam. She doesn't want her to necessarily be a part of this team, but because of the job, they do need 3 people. So she has really no choice but to embrace Sam as part of the team. And so there's this outward, antagonism going on here that Exarchopolis is extremely playful with. And it's a side of her I just haven't seen before. And then you get to the end where things emotionally open up for Alex a little bit. And it is the classic Exarchopolis that I am just head over heels in love with. That I just absolutely adore. Okay. Where she's just able to emotionally engage in ways that few others can. And so when called upon, it's like this magic trick that she can pull out, that even though this film is mostly diverting, when the pathos needs to be there, she does it so effortlessly, and you're like, God damn it, that's very moving. I can't help myself. That's I'm really drawn in emotionally because of what's happening. It's so good. But I will say, from a storytelling perspective, I think Laurent does a great job of building up, because this, narratively, plot wise, this film is so simple. It's rudimentary. You don't have to think about it. Yeah. That it just becomes about the character work. What makes these characters tick, why they're together, why they're so fun together, that when the stakes are brought up to where they might be torn apart in some way, you do feel the heft of that. You understand why Alex is emotionally vulnerable when the stakes are at its highest. So I really liked it a lot. I will go to bat for the film. Again, I know it's mixed.
Yeah,
I haven't
sounds
read all the
interesting though.
reviews, but I really liked it a lot. Absolutely will be a nominee for me for Best Surprise Movie. I enjoyed the living hell out of this. It's on Netflix, and go watch it.
I sometimes forget that Melanie Laurent. I always mispronounce that name, but Melanie Laurent has directed quite a few movies.
Yeah.
Like, most people recognize her obviously from Inglourious Bastards, which I
Yep.
guess is where she got her American start. When people started
Mhm.
to recognize her here over in the States. But yeah, I was looking at her IMDb page as a director. She's got like 7 movies, including this one. I think that's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And I think that comes through, honestly. I mean, her filmmaking isn't going to blow you away. It's not a David Fincher or a Martin Scorsese or Steven Spielberg.
Sure.
But it's also sharp enough that it doesn't feel like a first-time director either.
That's good.
And, maybe some of the action comes off that way, as if this isn't her forte necessarily. I don't know. I haven't really seen any of her other directed films that I'm aware of anyway. But again, this film isn't about the action. It's not trying to,
Right.
it's not about that as much as it is the camaraderie. Like, even when they're in the middle of a heist or they're in the middle of a tense situation, it's less about what's happening, how the characters are stealing or what's happening. It's more about the character work inside of that. Like how they're conversing through their earpiece, or how they're stealing a painting, and a conversation that takes place, and the humor inside of it. It's more about that than it is staging, it's not trying to be Jason Bourne. Okay. And so
clever way to throw that in there. We just got some Jason Bourne news, so I see what you did.
Maybe we'll get to that at the end of the show, but
okay.
My point is to say, sure, if you want to criticize the film because its action is tepid, fine. But the film is clearly, its mind is in other places.
Yeah.
It's like the staging of the action is not important to this movie at all. It's all about its character work, and because of the storytelling and the performances here and the sincerity of it all.
Keyword.
Very
Keyword. That always makes a movie tick. Sincerity. Yeah. Sincerity, people.
So I really like it, and like I said, it's on Netflix right now. You can go and check it out. Under 2 hours, just under 2 hours. So it's It's a breezy watch. I loved it. Okay. Where shall I go next? Let's move from that. Let's go in a very different direction. Okay. Let's talk about a horror movie. It's one that Brendan mentioned earlier. When Evil Lurks.
Yep. I almost watched this one.
Ragnar.
But from what I understand, not a movie I should catch up with just leading up to the holiday Thanksgiving season.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a hard watch this time of year if you're wanting to indulge in joy and festivity. I actually watched this on Halloween night after we got back from trick-or-treating.
Okay.
I threw on When Evil Lurks, and it was extremely appropriate because, my God, it is a daunting experience.
Okay.
This film is extraordinarily brutal. It is bleak with a capital B, but it's also the best horror film of the year for me. I haven't seen everything, as we indicated. I, sadly missed out on the new Exorcist movie.
If you end up watching that and you come out on the other side saying, that was really good, what are y'all talking about? I might have to fire myself from this show.
I don't suspect that I'll like it based off of how I feel about David Gordon Green and Halloween.
Yeah,
So
that's fair.
I don't know if I'll catch up with it anytime soon. I haven't seen the new Thanksgiving horror film. I mean, there's many horror films.
Yeah, I haven't
blind
seen
spots.
Saw X or Saw 10, whatever you want to call it as, but apparently that's actually not a bad movie.
Yeah. I've heard actually good things about that. That's one I'll maybe try to catch up with before we get to the InSession Film Awards. But that is to say, of those I've seen, When Evil Lurks, I'll go as far as to say this, Brendan. It's not even just the best horror film of the year for me. I think it is maybe even in my top 20 at this point.
Wow. Okay.
I think it's one of the best films of the year, period.
Okay.
Some
I
of
guess
it
I have to
is-
watch it.
A lot of it is also the craft. It is one of the best crafted movies. If you simply watch it and study its cinematography, its sound design, the performances. It is incredible from that point of view. It's
Okay.
bold. It's very sharp. The cinematography and editing is especially excellent. One of the best shot movies of the year. It's not often we talk about horror film in the realm of best cinematography. Maybe that should change.
Oh, it absolutely should change.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. When Evil Lurks is quintessentially one of those movies that makes you wonder why we don't broaden our horizons when it comes to that category. Award season won't, at least not this year. Maybe for you and I, When Evil Lurks will very much be considered for it because the cinematography here is great. The performances are very good. It's viscerally harrowing to watch. But there's no denying its ambition, and I love how unpredictable it is. And I guess I don't want to get too much more into that because I don't want to give anything away other than to say it starts off with these two brothers investigating a possession of sorts. And I guess I'll just leave it there because if you haven't seen it, this film has a lot of twists and turns that are wicked.
Yeah.
And I just don't even want to accidentally get into too much detail.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I was gonna say I've heard that there are. It's the same thing that people said about Barbarian when that came out. I know we were, weirdly talking about that movie to open up this show, so I guess it all comes full circle now. But that is a film, Barbarian, that was sort of reliant on your not knowing where that film was going to go. There was all this buildup that, it's going to pull the rug from under your feet at least 3 or 4 different times. And to its credit, the film kind of does. So I heard some similar reactions to When Evil Lurks that I haven't even watched a trailer for this movie. I just know the word of mouth.
Going blind. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like I didn't really know much about it other than I had seen a few people talk about it on social media. And that's what inspired me to go and watch it.
Okay.
And it's very good. It's very, very good. And make sure you have a pick-me-up afterward. That's all I'm saying. Stand-up comedy.
And
make walk.
Make sure I don't no snacks while watching it either.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Make
sure that you're away from food and drink, or at least food. You might need a drink or two.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. It's very, very good. It's just extremely dark and bleak, but
okay,
for reasons that I think are powerful in the in context of the movie and the characters, and I'll just leave it there. I don't want to get too much into it.
All right. Well,
it's easy to spoil.
Okay, I look forward to it.
Very good. All right, the next film I'll briefly talk about is a film that Brennan and I wanted to do a full review of, and we just ran out of time. And that is The Last William Friedkin, the Caine.
Yeah. We almost planned that one, and I think it was my wedding that got in the way.
Yeah, the wedding and then everything, like the aftermath of it, because for me it was the Disney trip and the birthdays and everything that followed. So we just ran out of time. I will say though, I think it's a compelling final film.
Okay.
For the late great William Friedkin. It's a little restrained in its approach, but I think that allows for some captivating performances, and the cast takes full advantage. This is a movie where performance is front and center. The writing is sharp. The writing is very good. There's some great verbal sparring going on here. It is a courtroom battle after all, so it is something you would expect in that regard. But I think more than the writing, it's these actors and how they make this film immensely gripping from beginning to end. And I really enjoyed the film. It's pretty straightforward in terms of what happened, who's on trial, why he's on trial. There are some interesting reveals that undermined this individual that's on trial, both in terms of the prosecution and even the defense. It's really compelling. I guess, again, I don't want to get too much because that slips into spoiler territory real quickly.
For sure.
But how that is deconstructed here, I think, is actually really quite incredible. And it leads to a final moment that's a little surprising. It's heavy-handed and on the nose. In some ways, it's very freaking-esque.
I was gonna say, like, it sounds like you're describing and completely not describing the freaking of Bug and Killer Joe era.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's definitely that.
Yeah,
It's
because
a
I'm
little
hearing,
bit of
okay,
both, yeah.
surprising, heavy-handed. Okay, it sounds like the ending of those movies. But then you're talking about restraint. It's like, wait, maybe he's not talking about those movies, or at least that era of William Friedkin. But Friedkin's always someone that was willing to challenge people. It sounds like in this case, he's challenging people through his words as opposed to his direction.
Yeah, it's very much that. It's a movie that will, in the end, slap you across the face with its ideas. But that really comes more, I'd say, in the last 20 minutes.
Gotcha. Okay.
Especially once we leave the courtroom. The final scene is away from the courtroom, and that's where it's at its most heavy-handed. But even the final moments of the courtroom proceedings, when we start to realize how the individual on trial is being undermined, again, I'll say vaguely, the film, it starts to become evident as to what's happening and where things are going. And again, the back and forth in that regard, I think, is fantastic. But the messaging starts to ramp up, and you start to see Friedkin kind of play with his commentary there a little bit more, in a way that I think is fascinating.
Sure.
Well, the reason I call it restrained is there's nothing about this film from a form perspective, from a craft perspective, that's going to wow you. This is let the camera rest. We'll edit back and forth between the prosecution and the defense. Let the lawyer's lawyer. We'll get reaction shots from those on the stand and, again, the character on trial. And we get reaction shots from the panel of judges.
Yeah.
And that's it. So there's like 5 cameras set up. And this is based off a stage play, of course. That goes back, I don't even know how far, the 50s? 52?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I think it was somewhere around there. Yeah.
I think the novel came out in 1952 and the play was 53. Something along those lines. So this has been around for a while. And Friedkin doesn't hide that fact. He simply sets the cameras up in a very simple way. And again, it becomes an actor showcase. He just lets the actors do their thing, and they're riveting. Jason Clarke is especially, man, what a year he's having. Between this and Oppenheimer, as lawyers of sorts, I don't know if he's a lawyer in Oppenheimer, but he's certainly questioning in a lawyery kind of way.
He's got very prosecutor vibes. We'll
yes,
say.
although in this film he's the defense attorney, but still.
Okay. Yeah. So he's covering both tracks of the courtroom
both
drama.
Sides of the coin, yeah. And he's very good. Like similarly, he chews on that dialogue in a captivating, engrossing way. Kiefer Sutherland is very good, and not just in terms of how he delivers his dialogue, but there are physical cues that are sometimes subtle, sometimes not subtle. And the film makes it clear when it's not supposed to be subtle.
Yeah.
Maybe that's where Friedkin is a little less restrained, but mostly it is restrained. But again, it's to emphasize the performance.
Sure.
So even when he is going outside of that restraint, when he's taking the handcuffs off, it's still to emphasize performance more than anything else. So
Right.
but yeah, very good.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this one. This is on Showtime, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe that is correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to this one.
Okay, the next film I want to talk about, as I pull it up here, is the film Fingernails, starring my girl, Jessie
Your girl,
Buckley.
Jessie Buckley.
My other girl. I
You
have
got a lot of
couple,
girls,
apparently.
man.
But yes, love her in this. It also stars Riz Ahmed and Jeremy Allen White.
Okay.
I can't help myself. I liked this film. This is another one of those that has gotten tepid responses.
I was gonna say, just you simply saying you liked it. I feel like you're sort of above the usual threshold from what I've been hearing about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's great, but what I like about this film, and I hate to sound like a broken record, are the performances. It's Jesse
Okay.
Buckley and
Okay.
Riz Ahmed, and they give to me it's how internalized these performances are. So much
Sure.
of what they convey isn't through dialogue.
Right.
There's of course enough dialogue here to articulate the struggle, the conflict that they are experiencing, and where they find themselves within the context of this film. There's also interesting world building going on here in the sense that there's technology that will determine, at least this is what this company does. The film never really gives us any sort of indication if this technology is accepted publicly or if it's just something that people walk in and
Yeah.
take this test and maybe
Interesting.
they just accept the results as true. I don't know. But I kind of like that ambiguity.
Yeah.
But for the Jessie Buckley character of Anna, she is dating Jeremy Allen White's character of Ryan, but she wants to work at this company that has this technology because her relationship with Ryan is mundane. They've kind of settled into a routine. It's banal. And so she isn't sure if she's supposed to be with Ryan, but they took the test and they were a match.
Okay.
And so she starts working there hoping to find more answers, where Amir, the Riz Ahmed character, his situation is a little bit different, I'll say, without getting into spoilers, I guess.
Okay.
And so the film kind of wants to examine this whole notion of being a quote unquote match with someone. Like, what does that actually mean? Does it mean anything? Does it have to look a certain way? You know, couples that convey or that seemingly are a match on the surface, they have feelings toward each other. They have all the right cues. They give away all of the right signs, but maybe there's something underneath that keeps them from being fully a match. And the antithesis, as we see with Ryan and Anna, where they don't seem to be a match at all, but somehow the technology says they're 100% a match. And the reason the film is called Fingernails is that you have to give up one in order to take the test. Like you literally rip off a fingernail. Both parties do. They put it into a machine, and somehow the machine does its thing and gives you a result. So if that makes you queasy, you might want to skip those scenes.
Now that's what I was going to ask. How
It's
graphic?
It's not graphic. You don't actually see the nails coming off or anything.
But there's enough there, like viscerally, that you can
Yes,
at least
that
like
it'll
you
still
you
make
can
you
react
squirm a
to
little
it.
bit.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll make you squirm a little bit. At least the first time or two. Eventually, as the film goes, there's a couple of others where it's more brief, and we kind of we get the point. We kind of skip past it a little bit.
Okay.
But yeah, it's there. It'll make you squirm a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's a methodical film. It's very slow. I don't know if the film fully realizes its ideas, but I liked what it was examining enough. And again, there's an internalized approach to it all. It doesn't want it's the opposite of freaking. It doesn't want to spell anything out. It just kind of lays out some murky ambiguity and I don't know. It's an interesting world. It's a different world than anything we've seen this year.
Yeah. Okay.
And I kind of liked its its mood, its tone. It's a little melancholic. It's uncertain. It's it wants to explore the boundaries of relationships and what that really looks like when your desires are being tested, literally in this case, being tested, and the tests don't reverberate how you feel on the inside.
It's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at the reviews on my Letterboxd page based on those who I follow, and you did say that the movie is getting mostly mixed reviews, but there actually is kind of a split between certain critics and certain people I respect. Some who actually don't care for it at all, and then some who actually think this is really good. Like there is kind of a disparity there, which usually means the film is at least attempting something. It's at least going for something kind of bold.
That's how I feel. Like
Yeah,
it might not get there fully,
mhm.
but at the very least, you have to appreciate that it's building something that is distinctly unique.
It's ambitious.
It's ambitious. This world is it's different. It's new, and maybe that feels all the more invigorating in the world of sequels and
yeah,
reboots and remakes.
it does, and I guess that's. Man, I don't mean to derail the conversation from Fingernails into something else, but I think it does springboard another conversation we can have about film criticism these days. Is that some people just put more stock into whether movies are simply ambitious during our time or if they are in fact failed ambitions. Some people like us are a bit, I don't want to say easier to please, but we tend to welcome failed ambitions, right? But some people are still really hard on that. If it's a failed ambition, that means the movie does not work and I need to be harder on it. And I'm saying that not that that's wrong. That's a fair response. But that's usually why we see movies that are ambitious like this have very polarizing responses. Because of how there's different perspectives are coming at a movie that is maybe not as successful, but is at least trying something.
Yeah, and that to me is why I found it very engaging.
Gotcha.
And then you add in the performances there, and I do think this film has the DNA of something, quite compelling. It's again maybe a little rough around the edges in terms of storytelling. And I think that's really the biggest disparity that I've seen. I know some people have found the script here to be a little undercooked. And again, I don't know if I disagree with that. I do think that's maybe the biggest issue here. However, the film for me, where I will push back against that criticism, is that the film fills in those gaps for me with the ambiguity of these performers.
And that happens.
They speak to it without articulating it verbally, I think, anyway. And again, I also love that the film doesn't really care to explain much as far as how any of this works. It does a little bit in the beginning. It gives you a foundation, but the film sets out to question that foundation as it goes.
Okay.
That by the end, we're supposed to question this test, this company, this whole world that we've invested in. We're supposed to question if there's any validity to it at all.
Yeah.
And thematically speaking, I find that compelling, that whole idea of routines, mundanity, how that affects relationships. We're with someone that we feel compatible to, but what does that mean exactly? Maybe that means something you didn't, or maybe that's changed over time.
Yeah.
Like it wants to ask all those questions. Could it have done more with those questions? Maybe. I'd be willing to hear that argument. And I don't necessarily disagree. That's why, this film isn't going to end up in my top 10 or anything. But to your point, yes, I do think it's going for something. That ambition is there. It has conviction, and it does it in an artistic way that I appreciate.
Yeah.
That definitely speaks to my sensibilities.
And conceptually, it does sound very interesting.
Yes, absolutely. You've never seen anything like this, at least that I can recall. At the very least, I think it's worth giving a go just for that. So again, if you can handle the whole fingernail thing.
which I don't know if I can. I'm very I'm very
I was
precious
very
with my
I squirmed.
fingernails.
I'm not gonna lie, I squirmed. But you know what's coming. Like the film again doesn't hide that. You know what's about to happen. It's not like it just happens all of a sudden. It's not like hard cut fingernail ripped off. Like it's not that at all. You can prepare for it.
It's not quite a schlocky gore fest or anything like it. It's not visualizing it in that way.
Yeah.
Put it this way, it doesn't make Jigsaw happy.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. A couple more. I'm not going to get into these because I know we're going long on time here. So I'm just going to mention them real fast. I did catch up with the Kitty Green film, The Royal Hotel. And this is her reuniting with Julia Gardner after they did The Assistant together in 2019. You and I were both big fans of that one.
Yeah, we like that.
And The Royal Hotel doesn't quite reach the heights of
I've heard.
The Assistant, but I still think it's good.
Okay.
Not great, but still good. If you want to give it a go, I still think it's worth your time. Did like that. And then a couple of documentaries I want to note here real fast. Silver Dollar Road, American Symphony, and Stamped from the Beginning. Two of those I think are on Netflix or coming to Netflix soon.
Okay.
And Silver Dollar Road, I believe, is on Amazon. I might be misremembering. It's been a couple of weeks since I've seen them, but all very good. I definitely encourage people to go and check them out as well.
Alrighty.
So wanted to at least mention those.
Good stuff. Movies are good this season.
Movies are good. And then, as I noted, we'll have a review for the new Hunger Games movie. It might even be out by the time this episode is live. And then Brendan and I, we're getting it together soon to do The Holdovers and Rustin. And I'll just mention them since we're doing a catch-up episode. I've already seen these movies, but we're waiting for them to be more widely distributed, and that is The Promised Land, Saltburn, American Fiction, and All of Us Strangers. I am dying to talk about all four. Man. We'll get to those soon as well.
This feels like 2020. It feels like 2021 all over again, doesn't it? Where they're just throwing so many movies at us. I don't know. Maybe it's because I got married this year that I just feel so behind. I'm not gonna blame the year. I'm gonna blame me. I'm gonna blame me for finding love.
Yeah, getting married in the fall during the busiest time of year, and then going away on vacation for a week.
Yeah.
That'll do it. Yeah, that'll get you behind a little bit.
Got a few different priorities this year.
Yeah. But look, no regrets whatsoever.
None. Got to marry my best friend.
Exactly. Love it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wind down for this week's show. Once again, thanks to all of our patrons. You people are awesome, and we thank you very much for your support. If you want to help us, that's patreon.com/InSession Film. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like on the video, comment, all that fun stuff. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, be sure to subscribe to the show there as well. If you want to leave a review, we'd greatly appreciate it there as well. If you want to email us, InSessionFilm@gmail.com is the way to get a hold of us. You can follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that fun stuff. And I think that's it. We got a lot of reviews, written content, InSessionFilm.com. I know Dave would want me to plug that as well. This is the time to be going to InSessionFilm.com for all things film related, whether it be written reviews or the work that JD and I do in podcast form and other written pieces. There's so much going on, not just on the podcasting front with regard to JD and myself, but Women in Session's doing a lot of great stuff as well. A lot of a lot of great stuff coming your way. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you said that. I forgot to mention their latest episode. Please forgive me, Kristen and Zeta. But they have a new episode up right now. Yes, they do. That was really fantastic. Definitely encourage people to go and check that out as well. Real fast, Brendan. Yay or nay? New Jason Bourne. Nay. Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think they have a good director, Edward Berger. Yeah. But I'd rather see him make another Edward Berger film. I agree.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm kind of bored. Bored. Whatever.
bored. I'm bored of the born.
I found this news boring. I'll simply say.
My only caveat, and maybe this is the case, is that they saw John Wick 4, were inspired, and said, let's do the same thing, but with Bourne instead. And they want to crystallize that character in the same way. That's my only thought there.
Well, I mean, not to spoil All Quiet on the Western Front, but we do know that Edward Berger knows how to sell a conclusion like that.
Yep. So
with some emotional stakes.
Here.
So maybe that is what's going to happen. Maybe you're not wrong, but I don't know. I'd still rather see him make his own movie and not get sucked into the corporate machine so soon.
One for you, one for me, baby. That's how it works.
No, hopefully he makes one for himself afterwards.
I agree. All right. Well, with that, let us know if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say on this episode. If I lost respect, I apologize, but I'm not ashamed.
You're a holiday man. Just leave it at that.
Holiday man. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thanksgiving rules.